Sign the papers and get out, Sloane. I won't have a liar sleeping under my roof for another second. Barrett threw a thick stack of legal documents onto the hospital's waiting room table. The thud sounded like a gavel. Around us, the sterile white walls of the Chicago Medical Center felt like they were closing in. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I looked at the papers, then slowly looked up at the man I had shared a bed with for 10 years. My eyes were cold enough to freeze his soul. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice a low, dangerous vibration. Skylar is in ICU with a fever of 104. Her white cell count is plummeting, and you're serving me divorce papers because of a lab result you don't even understand? I understand biology, Sloane, Barrett roared, ignoring the quiet signs. The doctors were clear. Skylar is not mine, and she isn't yours either. So, what did you do? Did you buy a baby because you were too broken to have one? Or did you swap her to hide who the real father was? Careful, Barrett, I hissed, stepping so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. One more word about my daughter not being mine, and I'll ensure you never breathe unassisted again. I pushed that girl out of my body. I have the scars to prove it. If the DNA is wrong, it's the hospital that failed, not my womb. The hospital doesn't make mistakes like this, he spat. You've played me for a fool for 9 years. I'm done. My lawyers will handle the rest. I'm not paying a cent for a stranger's medical bills. A stranger? My voice cracked with pure, unadulterated fury. You're calling the girl who has your supposed eyes, the girl who cries for you when she's scared, a stranger? You're a coward, Barrett. A weak, pathetic excuse for a man who runs the moment things get complicated. I'm the victim here, he yelled back. No, Skylar is the victim! I slammed my hand against the table, the sound echoing through the hall. Now get out of my sight. Go hide behind your lawyers and your money. I'll save her myself. I don't need a coward's DNA to be a mother. He turned on his heel, his expensive suit jacket billowing behind him as he stormed toward the elevators. I watched him go, my heart hammering against my ribs, fueled by a rage that felt like liquid fire. Sloane, please, calm down. I turned. Vivian, my mother-in-law, was standing by the vending machines, her face a mask of terror. Calm down? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Your son just disowned his dying daughter because he's too stupid to question a lab report. Did you know he was going to do this, Vivian? Did you bring the papers? No, Sloane, I swear. Vivian stumbled forward, grabbing my hands. Hers were ice cold. But you can't leave. You can't let him file those papers yet. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't burn this whole family to the ground right now, I demanded, pulling my hands away. Because I can save her, Vivian whispered, her eyes darting around the hallway. I know why the DNA doesn't match, and I know where the real donor is. My blood went cold. What did you just say? 90 days, Vivian pleaded, her voice a frantic hiss. Give me 90 days. Don't sign the divorce. Don't go to the press. And don't sue the hospital. If you do, the person who can save Skylar will disappear forever. I have $80,000 in a private account. I'm using it to track them down. They're already on their way from Seattle. I grabbed her by the shoulders, my grip like iron. Vivian, if you're lying to me to protect your son's reputation, I will personally destroy you. What happened 9 years ago? Just 90 days, she sobbed, refusing to meet my eyes. I'll get you the marrow. I'll save Skylar. Just let Barrett think he's won for now. Please, Sloane, for the girl we both love. I looked at her, this woman who had been like a mother to me, and realized she was terrified, not of the cancer, but of the truth. My mind raced. I was a fighter, a litigator. I knew a trap when I saw one. But Skylar didn't have time for me to be right. She only had time for a miracle. 90 days, I said, my voice like a death sentence. But hear me clearly, Vivian. If Skylar so much as coughs the wrong way because you're playing games, I'm not just calling the police. I'm coming for you first. I understand, she whispered. I turned back toward the ICU doors, my jaw set. I was alone now. No husband, no family I could trust. Just me, my fury, and a dying daughter who didn't even know she was at the center of a web of lies. The war had started, and I was going to win. The ICU at Chicago Medical was a fortress of silence, broken only by the mechanical hiss of the ventilator. Skylar looked fragile, her 9-year-old frame swallowed by the sterile linens. To Barrett, she was a legal liability. To me, she was the only reason the earth continued to rotate. I was Sloane Vance, a woman who dismantled CEOs for breakfast. I didn't crumble. I thrived in chaos. But this felt like someone had rewritten the laws of physics while I slept. The door swished open. Vivian, my mother-in-law, crept in like a ghost draped in Chanel. Her hands trembled as she clutched her handbag. "Is there any change?" she whispered. "The white cell count is a disaster," I replied, my voice a dangerous monotone. "Where is the donor, Vivian? I'm tired of your riddles." Vivian sank into a chair, her face crumbling. "Sloane, things happened 9 years ago. During the blackout, you were hemorrhaging, losing consciousness. You gave birth to a girl, but she was too weak. She was gone in 10 minutes. The world tilted. "What are you saying? I held her." "No," Vivian hissed, tears spilling over. "You held the girl I put in your arms. I couldn't let you wake up to a corpse. There was another baby born to a Jane Doe who had abandoned her an hour earlier. I paid the administrator $80,000 to swap the tags. I gave you Skylar." I stood up so abruptly the chair flipped backward. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You stole a child? You let me mourn a ghost while raising someone else's baby?" "I saved you!" Vivian cried. "And now I've found her biological mother in Seattle. She's an addict, Sloane. I've hired a recovery team for $50,000 to bring her here. If we go to the police, the state takes Skylar. She will die in a foster ward before a court decides who she belongs to." A white-hot flame of fury consumed me. I looked at Skylar, the girl who whispered, "I love you, Mommy," every night. She wasn't my blood, but she was my daughter. "You're a monster!" I spat. "Get that woman from Seattle here. Chain her to the bed if you have to. You will get that marrow into Skylar's veins." Suddenly, Vivian's phone rang. "Barrett." "Answer it, speaker. Now!" I snarled. "Mom?" Barrett's voice was laced with arrogance. "Tell Sloane to stop her investigators. I've moved my assets. I'm not paying for a child that was a fraud from day one." I snatched the phone. "Listen, you spineless coward. Hide your money. It won't matter. I'm coming for your firm and your reputation. You didn't just abandon a child, you abandoned me. Don't you dare speak Skylar's name again." I smashed the phone against the metal tray, shattering it into jagged pieces. 90 days, Vivian," I said, turning to the woman who had ruined my life to save it. Save my daughter, or I will make sure you rot in a cell next to your son. I sat back down and took Skylar's hand. She was mine by choice, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. I need a flight number, Vivian. I don't care if it's a private jet or a cargo plane. If she's not on Chicago soil by midnight, the deal is off. I was standing by the window of the ICU, watching the rain blur the Chicago skyline into a gray smudge. I hadn't changed my clothes in 48 hours. My silk blouse was wrinkled. My hair was a mess. But my eyes were sharper than they had ever been in a boardroom. The retrieval team is at the airport now, Vivian whispered, her voice shaking as she stared at the shattered remains of her phone on the floor. But Sloane, she's in bad shape. They had to sedate her to get her through security. Sedate her? You're bringing a biological mother here as a prisoner? I turned to her, a cold smile touching my lips. Good. At least you're finally showing some spine. Just make sure she's alive enough to give up that marrow. You've changed, Vivian said, looking at me with a mix of fear and awe. You used to be so poised. Poised women get lied to for 9 years, Vivian, I snapped. Angry women get things done. Now, go to the private hangar at O'Hare. Don't let the nurses see her until she's been cleaned up. I want her in a private room under a Jane Doe alias. If Barrett's lawyers find out we have the biological mother, they'll use it to claim I'm obstructing a legal investigation into the fraud. Vivian nodded frantically and hurried out. I turned back to Skylar. Her breathing was shallow. The machines were doing most of the work now. Mrs. Vance? I turned. A man in a tailored gray suit was standing at the door. He wasn't a doctor. He had process server written all over his face. I'm Sloane Vance. If you're here to serve me, make it quick. I have a daughter to save. He handed me a thick envelope. Barrett Vance has filed for an emergency injunction, ma'am. He's petitioning the court to freeze all joint accounts and, more importantly, he's contesting your legal right to make medical decisions for the minor, Skylar Vance, citing the DNA evidence of non-maternity. I felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it made my fingertips tingle. He's trying to stop her treatment? He's requesting a court-appointed guardian ad litem, the man said, his voice devoid of emotion. Until the identity of the child is established. Tell Barrett, I said, stepping toward the man until he took a nervous step back, that he just brought a knife to a nuclear war. He thinks he can use a lab report to erase 9 years of motherhood. He's about to find out how expensive that mistake is. I didn't wait for him to leave. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the secure server for my law firm. I was a consultant for the biggest sharks in the city. It was time to call in the sharks. Leo, I said when my partner answered. I need you to file a countersuit, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a breach of fiduciary duty within the marriage. And Leo, I want a restraining order against Barrett. Use the footage of him screaming in the hospital hallway. Make him look like a danger to the child. Sloane, if the DNA is real, the DNA is irrelevant, I yelled into the phone, my voice echoing in the sterile hallway. Motherhood isn't a lab result. It's a choice, and I chose her every single day for 3,000 days. Now do your job and bury him in paperwork so deep he can't see the sun. I hung up and walked back to Skylar's bed. I took her hand, her tiny fingers lost in mine. Barrett thinks he can take you away because we don't share blood, I whispered to her. But he forgot one thing. I'm the one who taught you how to fight. and I'm not done yet. My phone, the new one I'd grabbed from the hospital gift shop, vibrated. A text from Vivian. The ghost has landed. We are at the private clinic. She looks just like her, Sloane. It's terrifying. I grabbed my coat. The donor was here. The real war was about to begin. The private clinic on the outskirts of Chicago looked more like a fortress than a medical facility. I stepped out of the Uber into the freezing rain, my heels clicking sharply against the wet pavement. I didn't care about the cold. I was a storm of my own. Vivian was waiting in the lobby, pacing back and forth on the Persian rug. When she saw me, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "She's in room 402, Vivian whispered, her voice trembling. "The retrieval team had to stay in the hall. Sloane, you aren't prepared for this." "I've spent 9 years being unprepared for the truth, Vivian. I'll manage," I snapped, brushing past her toward the elevator. When the door to room 402 opened, the smell hit me first. Stale cigarettes, cheap gin, and the sharp, clinical scent of antiseptic. On the bed lay a woman who looked like a jagged, broken reflection of Skylar. She was skeletal, her skin sallow, her blonde hair matted and dull. But the shape of her jaw, the curve of her brow, it was undeniable. This was Jax. The woman who had walked out of an ER 9 years ago, leaving a piece of herself behind. "Who the hell are you?" Jax rasped, her voice sounding like gravel being crushed. She tried to sit up, but the restraints on her wrists held her back. "Where am I? Those suits kidnapped me." I walked to the foot of the bed and folded my arms. "I'm the woman who's been raising your daughter for 9 years, and you're the woman who's going to save her life." Jax froze, her bloodshot eyes narrowing. "Daughter? I don't have a daughter. That kid died. The nurse told me she didn't make it." I shot a lethal look at Vivian, who was cowering by the door. The lies in this family were like a Russian nesting doll. Every time you opened one, there was another one inside. "The nurse lied to you so she could sell your baby to this woman," I said, pointing a finger at Vivian. "And this woman lied to me for 9 years, but none of that matters right now. Skylar has leukemia. She needs a bone marrow transplant, and you're the only match on the planet." Jax started to laugh, a dry, hacking sound that turned into a cough. "So that's it? I'm just a spare parts bin? 9 years of nothing? And now you want my blood? Forget it. Call the cops. Tell them I'm here. I'd rather go back to the street than help people like you." I leaned over the bed, my face inches from hers. I didn't feel pity. I felt a cold, calculated desperation. "Listen to me, Jax. You think you're tough because you survived the streets? I've survived a marriage to a man who just tried to erase my existence. I've survived the news that my biological child is dead. I am a mother who is about to lose the only thing I love. If you think I won't make your life a living hell until you sign those consent forms, you've touched too many needles." "Is that a threat?" Jax spat. "It's a promise," I hissed. "I have $100,000 in a trust. You give the marrow, you get the money. You get a clean slate, you don't, and I'll make sure the police find enough evidence in your tent to keep you in a cage for the rest of your miserable life. Your choice." The room was silent for a long beat. Jax looked at me, seeing the fire in my eyes, and for the first time, she looked afraid. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text from my lead investigator, Leo. "Sloane, Barrett's PI. Just tracked Vivian's car to the clinic. They're 10 minutes away. They have a court order to halt any unauthorized medical procedures involving unknown third parties. They're coming to take the donor." My heart skipped a beat, then slammed into high gear. Barrett didn't want to save Skylar. He wanted to control the evidence of the fraud so he could win the divorce. He was willing to let Skylar die just to spite me. "Vivian!" I yelled. "Get the security team, lock the front gates, now!" I turned back to Jax, grabbing a pen and the consent forms from the nightstand. "Sign it!" I commanded, my voice like a whip. "Sign it now, or we both lose everything." "What's happening?" Jax asked, panicked. "The man who wants to see you dead is at the gate," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Sign the paper, and I'll protect you. I'm the only friend you've got left." Outside, the faint sound of sirens began to wail, cutting through the Chicago rain. The wolves were at the door. The sirens grew louder, a piercing shriek that tore through the heavy Chicago rain. I could see the flickering blue and red lights reflecting off the clinic's glass facade. Barrett wasn't playing games anymore. He had brought the law, or at least his version of it, to my doorstep. "Sign it!" I barked at Jax, thrusting the pen into her trembling hand. "I don't even know the kid's name!" Jax screamed, her eyes darting toward the door as the sound of heavy boots echoed in the hallway. "Her name is Skylar, and she has your eyes, your stubbornness, and none of your excuses." I leaned my entire weight onto the bed, pinning her gaze. "If you sign this, you aren't a drifter anymore. You're a savior. Choose, Jax. Be the woman who walked away, or be the woman who stayed when it mattered." With a ragged curse, Jax snatched the pen and scrawled her name across the bottom of the consent form. I grabbed the paper just as the door burst open. Barrett stood there, flanked by 2 men in dark suits and a police officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Barrett's face was flushed with a toxic mix of triumph and rage. "Step away from her, Sloane," Barrett ordered, his voice echoing with a cold, corporate authority. "I have an emergency injunction. This facility is unauthorized, and this woman is a flight risk and a key witness in a major fraud investigation. Officer, take her into custody." "She's not a witness, Barrett. She's a donor," I said, standing my ground between him and the bed. I held up the signed document like a shield. "And as of 10 seconds ago, she has legally consented to a life-saving procedure for my daughter." "You're too late." "Your daughter?" Barrett laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "We've established she's a stranger, Sloane. You're obstructing justice. You kidnapped a drug addict from Seattle to cover up the fact that you and my mother have been playing house with a stolen child for 9 years. I took a step toward him, my heels clicking like a death march on the linoleum floor. "I didn't steal anyone. Your mother made a choice, and I lived the reality. But you're making a choice right now. You're trying to stop a transplant. If Skylar dies because you delayed this, I won't just sue you. I will make sure every news outlet from here to New York knows that Barrett Vance murdered his daughter to save his bank account." "She is not my daughter!" he roared, his composure finally snapping. The police officer flinched, looking between us. "Mr. Vance, if there's a signed consent for a medical emergency, my hands are tied until a judge reviews the—" "I am the judge!" Barrett screamed, turning on the officer. That was the moment I saw it, the crack in his armor. He wasn't a man seeking truth. He was a man losing control. "Vivian," I called out, not breaking eye contact with Barrett. My mother-in-law stepped out from the shadows of the corner, her face swollen from crying. "Yes, Sloane." "Tell him," I said. "Tell him what happens if he takes Jax out of this room." Vivian looked at her son, the boy she had protected with a mountain of lies. "Barrett, if she leaves, Skylar dies. And if Skylar dies, I'll go to the DA. I'll tell them everything was my idea. I'll tell them you knew. I'll take you down with me." Barrett stared at his mother as if she had just grown a second head. "You're choosing her? After everything I've done to keep this family's name clean?" "There is no family name without Skylar," Vivian whispered. Barrett looked at me, his eyes full of a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. He knew he couldn't win this round, not with the police watching and his own mother turning state's evidence. "This isn't over, Sloane," he hissed, leaning in close so only I could hear him. "You can save the girl, but I will strip you of every cent, every title, and every memory of the life you thought you had. You'll be just as much of a ghost as that junkie on the bed." "I'd rather be a ghost with a daughter than a king in an empty castle," I retorted. "Now get out of my clinic." As the door slammed shut behind them, I collapsed against the wall, my lungs finally burning for air. I looked at Jax, who was staring at the ceiling, a single tear tracing a path through the dirt on her cheek. "Is she really like me?" Jax asked quietly. "She's better than both of us," I said, straightening my blazer. "And we're going to keep her that way." I picked up the phone. "Dr. Sterling, get the OR ready. We're coming in." The transfer back to Chicago Medical was a blur of high-speed sirens and whispered prayers. We moved under the cover of a private ambulance, an expensive precaution to ensure Barrett's lawyers couldn't file another emergency stay while we were in transit. By 3 a.m., Jax was prepped. The ghost of Seattle was now a patient in a sterile gown, her system being flushed with fluids to stabilize her for the harvest. I stood in the scrub room, staring at my reflection in the stainless steel. My eyes were bloodshot, my skin sallow under the fluorescent lights. I looked like a woman who had been to hell, but my hands were steady. "Sloane, you need to sit down. You haven't eaten in 24 hours. I turned to see Dr. Sterling. He looked at me with a mixture of professional concern and wary respect. He knew now that the administrative error from 9 years ago was actually a criminal conspiracy. But he also knew that Skylar's heart was still beating because I refused to let it stop. "I'll eat when Skylar's counts go up," I said, my voice raspy. "Is everything ready?" "Jax is under. We're beginning the bone marrow aspiration now. If all goes well, we'll start the infusion into Skylar by dawn." Sterling hesitated. "Sloane, the police were here again. Not the ones with Barrett, detectives from the Major Crimes Division. Someone tipped them off about the record swap." I felt a cold prickle of dread. "Barrett, he couldn't stop the surgery, so he's trying to blow up the building." "They're waiting in the lobby," Sterling warned. "They agreed to let the procedure finish, but the moment the infusion starts, they want to talk to you and Vivian. They're calling it a kidnapping and fraud investigation." "Let them wait," I said, my jaw tightening. I'm not leaving my daughter's side. I walked into the observation gallery overlooking the OR. Below me, I saw Jax on one table and, through the glass partition, Skylar on the other. It was a macabre bridge of blood and bone. 9 years of separation were being bridged by needles and tubes. Vivian was there, huddled in the corner of the gallery. She looked like she had shriveled. The weight of her $80,000 lie was finally crushing her. "Sloane," she whimpered. "Don't," I said, not looking at her. "Don't ask for forgiveness. You didn't do this for Skylar, and you didn't do it for me. You did it to keep your world perfect. Now your world is on fire, and I'm the only one who can keep you from burning alive." "I have the money," Vivian whispered. "The rest of it, 150,000 coolers. I can get us out. We can take Skylar and Jax to a private island, a place where Barrett can't." "Stop talking like a criminal." I turned on her, my anger flashing white hot. "I am a mother, not a fugitive. I'm going to walk down to that lobby. I'm going to look those detectives in the eye, and I'm going to tell them exactly what happened. And then I'm going to sue the hospital, the administrator you bribed, and your coward of a son until there's nothing left but ash. But you'll go to jail. Maybe, I said, leaning over the railing as the surgeons began the first incision on Jax. But Skylar will be alive to visit me. That's a trade I'll make every damn day. Just then, a nurse entered the gallery, looking panicked. Mrs. Vance, your husband is on the phone. He's at the police station. He says if you don't sign the full confession and the waiver for the divorce settlement right now, he's going to release the DNA results to the press. He wants to shame the fraud out of the city. I took the phone from the nurse's shaking hand. Barrett, I said, my voice calm, lethal, and utterly devoid of fear. Sign the papers, Sloane, he hissed over the line. I've got a journalist from the Tribune right here. I'll make sure your name is synonymous with child thief by the morning news. Go ahead, I said, a dark laugh bubbling up in my throat. Tell the world that you're trying to destroy a dying girl's chance at life because you're mad about your prenup. Tell them you're the man who abandoned his daughter because of a lab test. I'm a litigation expert, Barrett. I've survived worse than a bad headline. But you're a man who lives for his reputation, and I'm about to turn yours into a punchline. I didn't wait for his reply. I hung up and dropped the phone into the trash can. The infusion is starting. Sterling's voice came over the intercom. I pressed my hand against the glass. Fight, Skylar, I whispered. Mommy's right here, and I'm not going anywhere. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the smog of the Chicago skyline, casting long, clinical shadows across the ICU. Inside the room, the red lifeblood of a stranger was slowly trickling into Skylar's veins. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I stood by the bed, my fingers interlaced with Skylar's. She was still unconscious, her face pale, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't look like she was fading into the white sheets. She looked like she was anchoring herself back to the world. The first unit is in, Dr. Sterling whispered, checking the IV line. Her vitals are holding. Now, it's a waiting game. We need to see if her body accepts the graft or if it declares war on it. She's a Vance, I said, then corrected myself with a bitter smile. No, she's a survivor. She'll fight. The heavy double doors of the ICU swung open. 2 men in charcoal overcoats entered, followed by a woman with a badge pinned to her lapel. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy with the scent of wet wool and impending doom. Sloane Vance? The woman asked. Her voice was professional, but her eyes held a trace of pity. I'm Detective Miller. We need you to come with us. Now. I'm not leaving this room until the second unit is finished, I said, not moving an inch. My voice was a steel wall. Mrs. Vance, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy to commit identity fraud and custodial interference, Miller said, stepping closer. And we have a court order to take Vivian Vance into custody for questioning regarding the 2017 hospital records. Vivian is in the chapel, I said, pointing toward the hallway. Take her. But if you try to put handcuffs on me while my daughter is in the middle of a transplant, I will make sure the civil rights lawsuit I file against the CPD is the biggest headline this city has seen in a decade. Miller hesitated, looking at Skylar, then at the doctor. She sighed and stepped back toward the door. We'll wait in the hall. 30 minutes. Not a second more. As they stepped out, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Jax. She was slumped in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse. She looked exhausted, her face a ghostly shade of gray, but she was awake. Is it done? Jax rasped, looking at the tubes connecting her life to the little girl's. It's starting, I said, softening my gaze. Thank you, Jax. I meant what I said about the money. It's in an escrow account. Leo will give you the details. Jax looked at Skylar for a long time. She looks like she's got a lot of fight in her. That didn't come from me. I gave up a long time ago. She looked up at me, a flicker of genuine respect in her hollow eyes. That came from the woman who raised her. You're a scary lady, Sloane, but you're a hell of a mother. Get her to recovery, I told the nurse. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't the police. It was Barrett. He didn't have his lawyers. He didn't have his suits. He looked disheveled, his tie hanging loose, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. He had seen the police in the hall and realized the walls were finally closing in. You've ruined us, he hissed, staying near the door as if Skylar's illness were contagious. The press is at the front gate. The board of the firm called an emergency meeting to strip my partnership. My own mother is being hauled off to a precinct. Are you happy now, Sloane? Is this the victory you wanted? I turned to him, and for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I felt a profound, freezing sense of clarity. I didn't do this, Barrett. You did, I said, walking toward him. You had a choice. You could have been the man who said, the DNA doesn't matter. She's my daughter. You could have stood by me against your mother's lies, but you were so afraid of being fooled that you threw away the only person who ever truly loved you unconditionally. I was the victim of a scam, he yelled, his voice cracking. No, I said, poking a finger into his chest, forcing him back toward the hallway where the detectives were waiting. You were the victim of your own ego. Now look at that girl one last time, because after today, you are dead to her. I've already filed the paperwork to strip your name from her birth certificate. In 90 days, you won't exist in our world. You can't do that. I'm still the legal father on record. The record you're calling a fraud? I smiled, and it was a cold, terrifying expression. I'm a litigation expert, remember? I'll use your own DNA evidence to prove you have no standing. I'm going to use the truth you weaponized to cut you out of her life like a tumor. Detective Miller stepped forward, placing a hand on Barrett's shoulder. Mr. Vance, we have some questions for you too. Your mother's statement just arrived. It seems she's claiming you knew about the $80,000 bribe back in 2020. Barrett's face went white. She's lying. She's trying to save herself. Tell it to the DA, Miller said, nodding to her partner. As they led Barrett away in handcuffs, he didn't look back at Skylar. He only looked at the cameras he knew were waiting downstairs. I walked back to Skylar's side and sat down. The sun was fully up now, flooding the room with gold. I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't hurt. One chapter ends, Sky, I whispered, kissing her forehead. But I'm still here, and I'm never leaving. The ICU had a different energy now. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by the grueling, quiet exhaustion of recovery. Skylar had made it through the first 48 hours without rejection. Her color was returning, a faint peach tint to her cheeks that made my heart ache with a relief so sharp it felt like a physical wound. But while the medical war was stabilizing, the legal one was just beginning to burn. You look like hell, Sloane. I didn't turn around. I knew that voice. It was Leo, my law partner. He set a coffee on the table and stood beside me. Give it to me straight, Leo. No sugarcoating, I said, my voice raspy. The police are giving you a pass for now, but the DA is under pressure, Leo sighed. The hospital swap is the biggest story in the country. The former administrator confirmed Vivian's $80,000 bribe. But here's the problem. Since the DNA proves Skylar isn't yours or Barrett's, and the birth certificate is a fraud, Child Protective Services is opening a file. They're calling her a ward of the state. I felt a surge of white-hot fury. Ward of the state? I have raised her for 9 years. If a social worker tries to take her, they'll need a SWAT team to get past me. We have to play this smart, Leo urged. We need Jax. If she signs over her maternal rights to you now, we can file for emergency adoption. But we have to do it before Barrett tries to claim she's an unfit donor to spite you. I marched to the surgical recovery wing. Jax was sitting on the edge of her bed, looking exhausted. I need your signature, I said, pulling the document from my blazer. The state is trying to take Skylar. They want to put her in the system because of what Vivian did. Jax froze. The system? I grew up in the system, lady. It's a cage. You can't let that happen to her. I won't, but I need you to waive your rights in my favor. It's the only way to lock Barrett out. Jax looked at the paper. You're really gonna keep her? Even knowing she's part me? I sat beside her, looking her directly in the eyes. I don't care about the DNA, Jax. I am her mother. I just need the law to catch up to the reality. Jax snatched the pen and signed her name in a jagged script. Keep her safe, Sloane, and don't tell her about me. Tell her I was a star or something. Something that doesn't smell like the street. I'll tell her her mother was a woman who saved her life, I said softly. I walked out, the document clutched to my chest. I had the paper. I had the donor. I just had to survive the next 90 days of war. But as I reached the nurse's station, I saw Barrett. He held up a smartphone, showing me a headline from the Chicago Chronicle. Stolen daughter. Secret tapes reveal Sloane Vance's knowledge of the swap. My heart went cold. Vivian must have recorded our conversation. Barrett hadn't just been losing. He'd been setting a trap. Checkmate, Sloane, he mouthed through the glass, a cruel smirk on his face. I didn't blink. I just looked at my daughter and felt the rage turn into a quiet, deadly resolve. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Barrett. You think a recording makes you a winner, Barrett? In this city, a tape is just a prologue to a defamation suit. I didn't raise my voice as I stepped into the hallway. The air between us crackled with malice. Barrett's smug expression remained fixed. He looked at me with the calculating eyes of a man who had already spent the settlement money. It's not just a tape, Sloane, he hissed. It's proof of a conspiracy. You knew the child wasn't ours and tried to extort my mother for 90 days. That's racketeering. The DA is already reviewing the transcript. By noon, you won't just be losing Skylar. You'll be losing your license. I don't practice law anymore, Barrett. I practice survival, I said, stepping into his space until he backed against the wall. You want to talk about the DA? Let's talk about the $1.2 million you moved into a Cayman account 3 hours after Skylar's diagnosis. Let's talk about the consulting fees you paid to a shell company to drain our joint savings while your daughter lay in the ICU. I didn't just spend the last 48 hours crying. I spent them auditing you. Barrett's face went from triumphant to ashen. You have no right to those files. I have every right. I'm still your wife, and I have power of attorney. I've already frozen those accounts for Skylar's future needs. You're broke, Barrett. You just haven't realized it yet. You bitch! He lunged forward, but I didn't flinch. Detective, I called out. Detective Miller appeared instantly. Barrett froze. "Mr. Vance was just leaving," I said with mock politeness. "He has an appointment with a bankruptcy lawyer." As Barrett stormed toward the elevators, I turned to Leo. "Did you get the signature on the emergency protection order?" "I did," Leo said, handing me the document. "Barrett is barred from within 500 feet of Skylar. But Sloane, the press is outside. They're calling you the Lady Macbeth of Chicago. We need to get ahead of this." "Then let's give them a real story," I said. "Call a press conference in the hospital lobby in 1 hour." "Are you crazy? You'll be torn apart." "No," I said, looking through the glass at Skylar, who was finally waking up. "I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. From Vivian's bribe to Barrett's abandonment. I'm going to make the people of this city decide who is the real parent, the one with the matching DNA, or the one who fought the world to keep a dying girl alive." I walked into Skylar's room. She looked at me, her voice a raspy thread. "Mommy." "I'm here, baby," I whispered, kissing her knuckles. "Where's Daddy?" I hesitated for only a second. My heart broke, but my voice was iron. "He couldn't be here, Sky. But you have me. You're the strongest girl in Chicago." "I feel different," she murmured. "That's just the new strength in your blood. Sleep now." I stood up and smoothed my blazer. I had 60 minutes to save my life and my daughter's future. I wasn't just going to a press conference. I was going to a trial by fire. The hospital lobby was a sea of blinding camera flashes and aggressive shouting. Microphones from every major network were shoved toward my face like a row of bayonets. I stood behind the podium, the cold marble floor of the Chicago Medical Center grounding me. I wasn't the woman they expected, the broken fraud or the weeping victim. I was Sloane Vance, and I was here to redefine the truth. "For 9 years," I began, my voice clear and amplified through the speakers, "I believed a beautiful lie. I believed I gave birth to a daughter who shared my blood. Today, the world knows that was a fabrication created by a woman desperate for a perfect legacy." The crowd went silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. My husband, Barrett Vance, has spent the last 72 hours trying to convince you that because our DNA doesn't match, Skylar is a stranger. He has used her illness as a bargaining chip in a divorce, abandoned her in an ICU, and tried to freeze her medical funds. I leaned forward, my eyes burning into the cameras. But motherhood isn't found in a double helix. It's found in the 3,000 nights I spent rocking her to sleep. It's found in the bone marrow of a woman who flew across the country to save a child she never knew. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. "What about the fraud, Sloane?" a reporter yelled. "You knew for 90 days. "I knew for 90 days that my daughter was dying," I shot back, my voice like a whip. "And I would have traded my soul, my career, and my freedom to ensure she lived to see her 10th birthday. If that makes me a criminal, then so be it. But I would rather be a prisoner with a living daughter than a legal parent with a grave to visit." I stepped away from the podium as the lobby erupted into chaos. By that evening, the Lady Macbeth narrative had shattered. The city saw a mother fighting a monster 90 days later. The air in Lincoln Park was crisp. Skylar ran ahead of me, her blonde hair bouncing as she chased a golden retriever. Her laughter was the only music I needed. "Slow down, Sky," I called out, smiling. Vivian was gone, serving 5 years for custodial interference. Barrett had been forced into a humiliating settlement. His own financial fraud was exposed during the discovery phase of our divorce. He was now a pariah, living in a small apartment in a city that no longer knew his name. Leo walked up beside me, handing me a thick manila envelope. "It's official, Sloane. The judge signed it this morning. Legal adoption is complete. She is yours. Permanently. I took the papers, the weight of them feeling lighter than a feather. I looked at the name. Skylar Vance, mother, Sloane Vance. Jax had moved to a rehabilitation farm in Vermont. We didn't talk, but every month I sent her a photo of Skylar's artwork. It was a silent pact of gratitude. Skylar ran back to me, her cheeks flushed with a healthy pink. She threw her arms around my waist. "Mommy, are we going to the museum today?" I knelt down and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. I didn't see a stranger's DNA. I saw my daughter. "We can go anywhere you want, Sky," I whispered. "The whole world is ours now." As we walked together, I knew the scars would remain. But scars are just proof that the wound has healed. I had lost a husband and a name, but I had gained the only truth that mattered. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who stays and fights for you when life gets tough. Cherish the people who love you for who you are, because real home is built on loyalty, not just a name. Thank you so much for listening to this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, please drop a like, leave a comment, and follow for more powerful stories coming your way.